Welcome to another episode of The Watchdog with me, Lowkey, here on Mimpress. As you know, we are going against the grain and watching the watchers on a regular basis. And we really could not do this without your support. So in any way you can, please do sign up to our Patreon and help us beat the algorithm by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting on this video here. Now, today we are going to talk about the human side of state power. We are going to talk about what is on the other side of the repression being meted out to those attempting to grab on to the hands of those in Gaza, what can be the price of solidarity with the Palestinians in a material way. Of course, Palestine Action has achieved some unprecedented victories in the recent period. The first of them being Barclays Bank divesting totally from 16,000 shares within Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms company, which produces over 80% of the drones that Israel is using in its genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. Now, that came off the back of 54 actions taken by Palestine Action, including 20 in one night. On top of that, we know that APCO Worldwide, the lobby group that Elbit Systems hired to achieve high-level access to the British government, even according to APCO, getting prime minister level access for the company, has now cut its ties with Elbit Systems, again, thanks to consistent campaign of Palestine Action. But there is a particular case where individuals are alleged to have been linked to a Palestine Action operation against the Filton Research and Development Center, which was established by Elbit Systems in Bristol. Now, that has led to 10 individuals being remanded so far for over 70 days. Now, behind every single one of those 10 people, there are families, there are people waiting on the other end of the phone, anxious and hoping that they can bring their loved ones out of this situation. You think of the calamity which has befallen the Palestinian people over 100 years of settler colonialism, which obviously intensified in 1948 and leading up to it, and now has intensified really beyond all previous levels of violence, that this campaign of settler colonialism is claiming victims even within this society, that people are finding a way to assert love and life in the face of this repression. And so we are joined today by three mothers of the Filton 10, and we are really grateful for you joining us today. We know that this is a very, very difficult time, and one of the hardest aspects of it is the level of injustice has required you to turn from just family members coping with this situation to now having to be almost activists for your daughter's release from jail. And that is a very, very difficult position to be in. And we really are grateful for you joining us today. Now, on my immediate left is Claire Rogers, the mother of Zoe Rogers, one of the individuals who is currently held on remand, alleged to have had involvement in the Filton operation. We are also joined by the mother of Fatma Rajwani, Sukaina Rajwani, on the far left, and also by Emma Cameo, who is the mother of Leona Cameo. Thank you all for joining us. And to start with Claire, if that is okay, how are you?
That's a very good question. I'm tired. It's been incredibly intense 3 months. I've had to change my working patterns. I've had to drop to part-time. I'm a single mum, so it's a lot of responsibility to carry. I've got a younger daughter, teenage daughter at home who's got her own needs, so it's a lot to carry. But I think I'm sustained at the same time by my lovely fellow members of this whole campaign, and by the sense of pride in what Zoe has done.
And Emma, same question to you. How are you keeping?
Well, it's not been a particularly good night. I haven't had my 16-year-old into A&E with suspected appendicitis, but I'm here. I'm much like Claire. I'm a single mother. I run my own business. I've just amalgamated 2 businesses into one to recover from COVID. So it's been, very busy time. And after my experience, it's turned my life completely upside down. But we just went 3 months fighting, and the girls behind bars become the president over my business, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm tired, but we're here.
And Sukaina, how are you?
So first of all, thank you for having us here today, inviting us here. In terms of how I am, it's been a challenging 3 months, I must say. Life has changed. I also have a younger daughter, she's 10. Things have been very challenging, but I must say that with hardship comes ease. And I have found a lot of community with the other parents within my own community. There's a lot of moral support out there, and that gives a lot of peace and comfort as well. Fatma Zainab has inspired me. She has opened my eyes, and that's something I'm grateful for as well.
And could you tell us about the petition and this, amazing success that the petition has had so far in terms of gathering signatures? It's very rare for a petition of this kind to get that level of widespread support. Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, we're blown away by the support. I'm actually not surprised. I think when you set out, and we were given help in writing the petition, when you set out the injustice of what's going on, of counter-terror powers being used against our loved ones, it is shocking. And I think that has got people's attention. So I think there are a lot of people out there who get it and who want to support this, and were shocked and have signed the petition, which is great.
So about 25,000 people, is that right?
More than, yes. Yeah.
Right. And just so we understand here, Britain is a signatory to the Arms Trade Treaty, which stipulates that it should not make any exports which may be used for violations of international humanitarian law. According to Article 1 of the Genocide Convention, all who are signed up to it should do everything they can to stop the commission of and the committing of the act of genocide. So there's quite a clear legal basis at which, if one was to prevent the export of arms to Israel by Britain, there's a sound basis of why a person would do such a thing. Now, the allegations against your daughters are that they've been involved in such an activity, but what was mobilized against them and the other 7 of the Filton 10 was being detained under the Terrorism Act. Can you tell us a bit about that, Sukaina?
So initially, when they were arrested on the 6th of August, they were arrested for breaking in, for causing damage, allegedly. But then the next day, they were rearrested by counterterrorism police under the Terrorism Act. This came as a shock to all of us. It was something unexpected, unprecedented. On top of that, they were held in solitary for 6 days without having permission to call us. We had no contact with our loved ones. We didn't know their well-being, if they were okay or not, what was happening. it was all horrific. It was like living in a nightmare. We were left in limbo. And finally, when they were charged, there was no terrorism charge. They were charged with criminal damage, violent disorder, and aggravated burglary. So this all came as a big shock for us. It's been 3 months now, nearly 3 months, and it's just like as if it was yesterday that all this was happening. And like I said before, it's been very challenging. It was 2 weeks before I was allowed my first phone call with Fatma Zainab, and another 1 more week, so 3 weeks before I was allowed to visit with her. And when I did speak with her initially the first time, she told me about all the panic attacks that she was having in solitary. It's been horrendous for all of us.
So sorry. Emma, my understanding is that in that initial period, you were also detained not with your daughter, but as part of the arrest of your daughter. Would you be willing to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I'm from Wales. My daughter, we call her Ellie. Her legal name is Leona. She lives in London. And I was given a phone. I was phoned in the afternoon to say that Ellie had been arrested. It did come as a surprise. They couldn't give me much information, and I was processing it, but I needed to work. I work in the studio in my garden. So I went off and saw a few patients. And a few hours later, I needed to clean myself from that and focus on what was coming. They said they were going to keep in touch with me. So I'm a Pilates instructor, and I worked out to kind of process things. And I came into my house from the garden. I was wearing a sports bra, and I live in like a field, semi-off-grid in the countryside, and I had a pair of shorts on, and I was sweaty because I'd worked out. And my French doors were open onto a private garden, and a policeman stood at my door and greeted me with, "Who are you?" And I looked at him. I was a bit shocked, obviously, and said, "I beg your pardon, who are you?" And then I felt somebody behind me, and I turned, and he had walked through my front door into my kitchen and then into my lounge wearing riot gear. He had full-on helmet. He looked like he was armed. They all had these huge puff, they've got protective gear on. And I was taken aback. He then took off his helmet, asked me who I was, said he was here to arrest me and to search the property. They didn't present me with a warrant. I didn't really take in what I was being arrested for. My son and his girlfriend weren't in the house at the time. They arrived during the search. And my son asked him, what was my mother being arrested for? And he said, "I've already told your mother." And at this point, I was sitting in handcuffs. And I said, "Well, to be honest, I can't remember what you arrested me for." Anyway, they took me. They searched the property. They took 3 laptops, 3 mobile phones. 1 laptop and 1 mobile phone was my 16-year-old daughter's. 1 was my business laptop and my phone. 1 was my daughter from London's laptop because she'd been home on holiday for a few days before she went off. I was taken to the local police station, stripped, put into prison gear. They took my jewellery from me. They told me my clothes were going to go to forensics. But that my earrings, I keep getting caught up with my jewellery, but it's important. They took my jewellery and said I could have that when I was released. I honestly thought I was going to be interviewed for an hour and released home. That was what I thought. I stood in the filthy cell for about 4 hours before they came and said they were transferring me at 10:30 at night to Bristol. So they took me in an unmarked car to Bristol, where they put me in another cell. I asked to speak to the duty solicitor in both places, and I wasn't given one. But by the time I got to Bristol at midnight, they, through the intercom, a duty solicitor said, "Look, it's too late. I'll be there tomorrow for the interview. I just advise you not to sign anything." It was 2:00 the following afternoon when 2 plainclothes police came in and rearrested me under the Terrorism Act and said they were transferring me to Newbury. I asked where was my solicitor. They said she'd just left. I said, what, without even coming in to say hello? Then they took me out. About an hour later, they collected me, took me outside and put me in a cage. The second one, the first one was in the back of a cage with no lap strap, but that was in Swansea and I drove slowly. In Bristol, I came out into the car park and my daughter was in one cage and I was in another. And the door was open. And I believe now that was for her to see me in order to frighten her. We got in the cage. They closed the door. There's no lap strap, no seat belt in this cage. I couldn't see her and I couldn't see out the back. And then the police station gates opened where they then put on the blue lights and the sirens and took me through Bristol onto the motorway, driving over speeds of 100 miles an hour. It was called a Code 1 apparently, which is for the Terrorism Act, because I asked the detective what that was all about. And they drove me to Newbury. Once they processed me, I mean, there's a whole 5 days I disappeared from my family. My son and my 16-year-old didn't know where I was. They thought that I was just going down to Swansea police station and I'd be back. There's lots to say of what happened in those 5 days. To begin with, I was just jumping up and down over my business. I had patients that I've got a duty of care for, and my clients, my Pilates clients. I knew that I was innocent because it was a wrongful arrest and they finally released me without charge. I did come across my daughter Ellie, apart from the back of the cage. I felt that must have been illegal to have been driving without a seatbelt. I just thought one wrong move on the motorway and my son would have lost his mother and his daughter that day. I saw her when we were put in front of the magistrates' court on screen in order for them to use the Terrorism Act to detain us for a further 5 days. It took them, there were several things that I feel like they didn't do, but I can't get anybody to take on my case. It's bizarre. It's like the country's gone quiet. I left the police station. They never gave me my call for a start. There's a voluntary group that come around every day to check on your human rights. They were the ones who spotted that because they kept asking me, have you had your rights? And I said, they keep offering me the leaflet, the synopsis for the idiot-proof guide to be able to see. And they never came up with it. They kept offering it to me, didn't come up with it. And then eventually this voluntary group, I think it was about the third day where I got it, where I could read that I was entitled to a clean cell. And I was in a filthy cell because this was a pop-up terrorist centre. It hadn't been used for some time. I could be graphic, but I shan't. The detective herself was horrified when I pointed out what I'd been staying in for 2 days. And it was because I was clearly traumatized that I didn't actually jump up and down and say something about it. Anyway, they did move me into the cell, into a clean cell. But I've lost my train. I can't remember where I was going with that.
The synopsis of your rights.
The synopsis of my rights. There was a clean cell. I don't feel like they ever indicated why they thought. There's a point in there that they have to say why they think I might be connected. And I thought, well, you haven't. You've just said in suspicion of, and they reeled, what the girls have been arrested for. But not my involvement or my suspicion of involvement, which I believe is something they should have done. The clean cell, my medicines, there's various other things, small things. But I never got my call. And when they finally, they eventually interviewed me, which took 3 hours. And then they took a few hours to corroborate my story and then said that I was free to go without charge. And at the desk, they said that they had rung my son. And I just lost it. I'd been so cool for the whole 5 days. I just did Pilates and meditated every day to just stay focused. And I just lost it when he said he'd called my son. And I said, that's my call to make. It's my call to make. And so he said, would you want to speak to him? And I said, when you said he's rung my brother and my brother is going to come and pick me up. And that's not what I wanted. So he did give me my son on the phone, and as soon as I heard his voice, I just lost it. I collapsed. I cried. I was a mess. Didn't have my composure at all. And then I left without my jewellery, which I was supposed to have been given. Yes, they had all my clothes for evidence and all that, but my jewellery was supposed to come back to me, and it never did. And to this day, I can't track it down. No police at Swansea, no police at Bristol, no police at Newbury have anything to do with my equipment, my jewellery, my clothes. It's all disappeared.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. What are some of the conditions that were placed upon your daughters throughout this time in detention?
So during the original arrest under the Terrorism Act, so our understanding is that they were in solitary. The only non-police officers they could talk to were their lawyer. They were interrogated for hours at all times of day and night.
At all times of day and night.
That's my understanding. And I know on at least one occasion, Zoe's solicitor said the police, it's been 3 hours, this is long enough. They were planning to go on for more hours, 5 hours, 7 hours. Yeah. And the solicitor stepped in and stopped it. They were able to see a doctor. They were not aware of what time of day or night it was because of the conditions of the cell. They couldn't see the time. There's no windows or indication of time of day.
They kept the lights on all night.
Oh, yes.
Which was different to the police station in Bristol. Yes. The lights went off at night, whereas when we went into the terrorism centre, the lights were on.
Bright lights, and then they would be checked on. Clanging with opening the door to check in during the night.
It was an old cell as well, and like Bristol, so they have to keep checking on you. There's a toilet in the corner, so the cameras are on you, but that's pixelated. Then there's the lights on all the time. They search you leaving the cell to go to see the doctor or to have a shower. Then they check you again going in, and while you've been gone, they've overturned your cell. What they expected we were doing, I don't know. They didn't take their eyes off us.
And just on that note, with all the checking that was going on, so obviously Fatma Zainab is a practicing Muslim and she wears her headscarf. And because the police would just randomly check in, not giving her enough notice to put on her scarf, she's like, Mom, I had to sleep with my scarf on because they would just literally come in and out and call them for the interrogations in the middle of the night.
Do we know the nature of the questioning? Is that something that can be spoken about in an interview? Is there anything preventing?
Zoe hasn't told me. I don't think she feels able to tell me what was said. Yeah. I don't know about anyone else.
I also understand that both Zoe and Fatma Zainab have written quite powerful poetry. It would be great to hear some of that if either of you were willing to read it or felt able to.
So this was a poem that she wrote. She first wrote it as a piece of prose. And then because I've been writing poems and sending them to her, we together realised that what she'd written was actually poetry. So she rewrote it. I had nothing to do with it. And she wrote it about, it's called Prison Conversations. And it was about people constantly saying to her, what are you doing in prison? You don't look like someone who should be in prison. She only turned 21 a few weeks ago. And this was what she said in response to that question in her mind. So Prison Conversations. When they ask why I did it, I tell them about the children, how their childhood is stolen from them, how their skeletons are left charred and smoking, how easily their bodies are crushed by falling buildings, how their skin melts as their flaming tents collapse around them. I tell them of the boy found carrying his brother's body inside his bloody backpack. I tell them of the girl whose hanging corpse ended at the knees. I tell them of the father holding up his headless toddler. I tell them of the mother who received the approximate weight of her family in body parts to bury, as they had all been shattered beyond recognition. Then I tell them about the history, how this has happened time and time again. I tell them about the Stern Gang, the Hilltop Youth, the wars of 45 and 67, Operation Cast Lead and Protective Edge. I explain how they called it mowing the lawn, cleaning the land of these human animals, how they calculate the minimum nutrients to keep everyone alive, chop a bit off and left only that inside. How since the war they've banned chlorine, morphine and children's toys, and much more that's needed for people to survive. Finally, I talk about how it was us that started it, with our Balfour Declaration and media suppression. And I say, I cannot stand for this. It can go on no longer. So I took action against Elbit, their weapons supplier. But I never forget to say that it was love, not hate, that called me. Watching their songs and dances for freedom, reading their hope-filled books, listening to their dreams of being doctors, teachers, journalists, and never giving up.
Wow. Extremely powerful words. You must be very proud too in all of this. Extremely proud.
And I was just talking to you guys earlier about the effect on her mental health of all of this. She watched a genocide being live streamed on social media. She started following all the Instagram accounts and she got me to follow them as well. She really educated me. And we had this sort of cognitive dissonance of watching these awful, terrible acts unfolding before our eyes. And then the British media suppressing it, not talking about it, the government ignoring it. And then going on marches. She went on march after march after march. She was studying, as you can tell from her poem, she was studying this in history. She was doing extra reading, really getting her head around the history. And it came to a point where she realised that the marches were not working and that nothing she'd done or could do was going to make any difference. And I tell the story of how she, for one of the protests she was going to go on, she wanted to display all the names of the children and their ages who'd been killed so far. It was only a couple of thousand at this point. And she brought a massive white bedsheet and a Sharpie, and she was going to write all of their names. And she didn't write a single one because she felt so hopeless. She felt so powerless in the face of, as many of us do. What can we do while children are being killed? And it was Palestine Action that gave her a way forward. It was Palestine Action that gave her a vehicle to say you can take direct action. And she was at the point, as so many of these brave young people had reached the point where they were willing to put themselves, to throw themselves into the cogs of this machine and make it stop. And I've been saying to people, I believe that because she was able to do that, and it was a sacrifice, and she may have lost her place at university, that she worked very, very hard to get. She made that sacrifice, but she is now freer than some of us outside prison because she knew she'd done something. And she doesn't have to see a single child has been killed and she did nothing. She didn't sit on her hands. She acted and put herself in the firing line. So that's given her, I think, a sense of inner peace. And I'm very, very proud of her.
Thank you. Sukaina, would you like to read us the poetry of Fatma Zainab?
Yes, of course. So Fatma Zainab wrote this poem while she was in prison. She is a big advocate of social justice. Even before the genocide started, she's been talking about Congo and Sudan. She's really passionate. And, with like Claire said, with the images coming out of Gaza, I would say to her that Fatma Zainab, I really can't see this. And she's like, Mom, you have to see it so you can feel. Otherwise, you're going to stop feeling and you'll become numb, and you'll become numb to their plight. So I found that really moving. This is the poem that she wrote while she was in prison last month. She starts off with, to the people of Gaza, I write to you in my state of love and grief. At night, I dream of a love so wide and so deep, it frees us all. It stretches across continents to fill the space between my brown body and yours. I wish the love I dream of was enough. I wish the love I dream of would hold your grief the same way that our silence holds violence. When there's nothing else to write about, I write about love. Because there is no life worth living, no strength worth perception, if not for love. The kind of love that forces you to witness, the kind of love that does not stay silent, love that is not patient or kind, but relentless and harsh. I dream of a love so encompassing it hurts. A love that does not make us less afraid, but a love that makes us less compromising. At night, I dream of a love so white and so deep it frees us all. When dawn breaks, I dream of waking up to a love that is not new, but old and ancient and unforgiving. The type of love that stands to action. There is no greater act of love than standing uncompromising between all which you know and that destroys, and all which could be rebuilt anew.
Thank you very much. You must also be massively proud of your daughter.
I am, like I said, I am really proud. I'm very inspired by her. Fatma Zainab is a third-year media student. She feels very passionately. She wants to make a difference. And she's been on so many protests and marches. She feels that her voice was not heard. As part of her university, Goldsmiths for Palestine, she was part of their solidarity group, taking part in rallies and teach-ins. She was part of the encampment there as well. But as with Zoe, she felt that nothing was making a difference. Her voice was not being heard. And the genocide just continues. And she did not want to be complicit.
Emma, would you be able to tell us a bit about Leonie's sort of trajectory towards this? What was her political involvement like prior to this?
Because she lives in London and we've just spent 5 years together, she got locked down in COVID, or 4 years. You know, she hadn't long left and gone back. So I didn't actually know very much other than she was attending marches.
Right.
And a conversation we had, she just said, you know, there's hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of London every weekend and the BBC are not reporting it. And I said, well, that's no surprise, is it? I saw much the same in COVID. But other than that, I didn't know anything else. Like I said, she came home for a 10-day holiday. So
really what all of this is a manifestation of something that we have evidence Israel has worked to establish, a sort of relationship between it and the Metropolitan Police, a relationship between it and the CPS. Through freedom of information, we found evidence that the Israeli embassy was pressuring the CPS and essentially trying to intervene directly, seems, into Palestine Action cases, as was reported by The Guardian. What you also have is specific figures within the Crown Prosecution Service who have been engaged by Israel lobby groups in this country. And in a way, the victories of what this form of activism has led to over time has meant that the state is seeking to find a effective deterrent, and they've settled on the idea that an effective deterrent is the Terror Act, remand. You know, there's also been efforts by Jonathan Woodcock, now Lord Wolney, in the House of Lords, to try and force upon Palestine Action a form of designation which would make any involvement illegal. Walney himself is somebody who historically has had deep involvement with several key Israel lobby groups, one of them being the European Leadership Network, which has been revealed as being part of the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs in Israel's Voices for Israel project. So essentially, the European Leadership Network is a foreign agent. And this is a lobby group which has engaged deeply with Woodcock, has paid for his trips over to occupied Palestine, where he's had dealings with the JNF, which is the largest settlement building body there. And so there's been a lot of pressure brought to bear on both the government and also the police. You know, you've seen the constant attempts of Israel lobby groups to get Mark Rowley, the head of the Metropolitan Police, to take a harsher position on all of these kind of things. And I think a case like this, but generally the development of Palestine Action, really reveals the limitations of the political system that we live in, because we have certain mantras which are repeated ad nauseum to us, that we live in a democracy with freedom of expression. But essentially what you're saying to people is you have to watch the continuous industrial scale killing of the most vulnerable people who are trapped in an open air prison where they're deprived of food, electricity, water, medicine. And you have to accept that that's part of the status quo of your political system. And ultimately, what your daughters are being accused of is loving others more than their own temporary, quote unquote, freedoms. But essentially, this is a society with implicit unfreedoms. And this is, you know, rubbing up against all of those things. I wanted to ask each of you if you had, and you're perfectly welcome not to, but if you had a message for the Palestinian people, what would your message be, Sukaina?
I would say that I am really sorry. I am really ashamed that I haven't been able to do anything. And that, you know, you're in my prayers, and just hang on in there. And inshallah, you will be free.
Inshallah. And Claire, do you have a message for the Palestinian people?
Very, very similar. I'm deeply ashamed of my government from the Balfour Declaration and before. I'm ashamed of their complicity, the provision of military support to genocidal states. I'm ashamed of the political cover, and I want to say that it's not in my name. It's not in my name, and my heart goes out to these beautiful people who deserve freedom. And I have a faith too that freedom is coming. I believe in that. Martin Luther King Jr. quotes that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And there's a lovely quote in the Old Testament about every man sitting under his own fig tree. And to me, it's and no one training for war anymore. No one will take up arms anymore. And to me, that's a promise for Palestine. That's a promise for a free Palestine. And I've been saying to people in Gaza on Instagram who I've become friends with, who have been lovely about Zoe. They've thanked Zoe, which, you know, it's so moving when they're going through so much. And we've agreed that we look forward to eating olives and drinking tea in a free Palestine. And that day is coming.
Beautiful. And Emma, would you have a message that you would like to convey to the Palestinian people?
Yeah, that first of all, I cannot comprehend what it must be like. I think of my Ellie and think she sacrificed her life, but it's nothing compared to what the Palestinian people are going through. We have a dear friend that's been back and forth Palestine for many years, helping. She's there currently now when we watch her reports. And that there's a term, isn't there, when we watch something so often that we have forgotten it. Escapes me.
Compassion fatigue.
And it's like, we mustn't let that happen. We three stand with, it's the strangest sentence to say that your daughter's in prison and you're incredibly proud of her, but they are standing on the right side of history. And not just the British government, but the people who aren't watching what's going on around us. It is, even here, there are signs of it. It's creeping. And we need to push back, every single one of us. We can't wait for somebody to come and rescue us and push back, just like the Palestinians can't wait for, they're dependent on young women doing something to save them. I'm speechless, really.
Well, I want to thank all of you for your dignity. I aspire to deal with adversity in the way that you three are, apparently. And I hope that we will be able to be with your daughters and with the rest of the Filton 10, embrace them and just let them know how much they mean to all of us. They are the best of us at this period of human history. When the books are written, they will look back at those that took these steps and describe them rightly as true heroes of human history. And that's something that we can all take pride in. If before we finish, I was just able to ask, what is the current status of the case and what can viewers do to support the release of your daughters?
So we do have a petition that's live. We've got 25,000 plus signatures on it. We would appreciate any support with signing the petition to get that attention, to put that pressure on the government, to make them aware that we are aware, that the public is aware, they're watching, and this is not right. This is not just what they're doing. That's one of the ways that the public can support. Claire?
Yeah, and just to be clear, the petition is demanding that dropping the terrorist connection, which is ludicrous, and it's also asking for them to be released on bail. Otherwise, they have a further 12 months in prison, having not been found guilty of anything. And we're also asking the government to reveal any of these dealings behind the scenes from foreign actors, by which we mean Israeli embassy and so on, Elbit Systems. So share the petition, put this all over your social media, shout about this. It's really important because, as we say in the petition, if we tolerate this, then our children will be next.
And they can't lock us all up. If we keep pushing back, they cannot. There's more of us than them.
Yeah, absolutely. As Malcolm X said, we are not outnumbered, we're out-organised.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to come here. And I hope that viewers will be energised to support the Filton 10 in every single way they can, to support Palestine Action and to keep pushing for an end to the Israeli genocide in Gaza and the war in Lebanon. Thank you for joining us.